Hey everybody, this is Deb with Truthification Chronicles, and we're going to start with a little blast from the past here. This is an article that was done back in May 25th of 2017, and this is by the American Free Press, and it's about the Unsealed FISA court order reveals warrantless surveillance by Obama administration in 2016. Yep. They were doing it back then. While Trump's Justice Department has stepped in to slightly limit the surveillance reach of U.S. intelligence agencies, we may have a much bigger problem than most Americans realize when it comes to the guidelines intended to safeguard our Fourth Amendment rights. Now, you might be wondering, what does this have to do with what's going on now? Well, this came out way back then. Remember, we're talking 2017, May 25th, 2017, and we're still not seeing the justice done in this. So here it's talking about this court ruling from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court found that the Obama administration had violated the NSA's minimization procedures involving queries of data acquired under Section 702 using U.S. person identifiers. The full scope of noncompliant querying practices had not been previously disclosed to the court. Now, there's a few things here that I want to point out to you. First of all, if you have been following my channel for a while, I actually did a video on this back in November, but I'm kind of expanding a little bit on it and focusing more on Admiral Rogers because he was the head of the NSA until just last June of 2018 when he retired. He played a very important role in what we're about to see unfold. In fact, he's kind of the guy at the heart of it. I mean, he's the one that kicked a lot of this off. And if it weren't for him, I don't think any of this would be coming out like it is. And so I really commend this man, and all of us as Americans should recognize him as a great hero because he was a true patriot. He believes in our Constitution, he believes in our laws, and he also believes that when there is corruption in our government, to the extent that we're seeing, it needs to be exposed. And this is what we're watching unfold before us, this thing that is showing all of the corruption. It's starting to come to the surface. You know, before all of this started happening, it was like there was corruption in our government. We all knew there was corruption in our government, but we didn't understand how bad it was. And now it's just like opening up a wound and having all this gross stuff come out. And that's what we're starting to see, and it's going to be even more in the future. So I wanted to point this out to you, this article. And again, if you want to see more about this article, you can watch that other video. But there's some important points I want to make on this. It all has to do with querying data. And, you know, Sarah Carter and John Solomon have been on this for a while. And what they say is more than 5%, or 1 out of every 20 searches seeking upstream internet data on Americans inside the NSA's so-called Section 702 database, violated the safeguards Obama and his intelligence chiefs vowed to follow in 2011. And this is something that you have to understand. The NSA deals primarily with foreign surveillance. And when they are looking at Americans, they are not supposed to be looking at Americans when they're surveilling these foreign entities. They're supposed to be focusing on the foreign people. But if a foreign person contacts someone who is an American, then they have that conversation going on and they have a record of it, but they're supposed to keep the American's identity masked. This is why in the video I just did on Flynn, the forgotten felony, that's why that was a huge crime, because his name should not have been released. It should not have been unmasked. He should have remained anonymous because the surveillance was on the Russians. And that's the only thing they should have, according to the law, been able to do. If they believe the American is involved in something, then there are procedures they can follow to get that unmasked. But it's very rare. And under the Obama administration, there at the end, they were unmasking people like crazy. They were for political purposes. They were surveilling all kinds of people. Now, I heard about this actually, a couple years ago, I think, and I believe it was Alex Jones that talked about it. He said that they had a query that included his name and his cell phone and everything else about him on there, details about where he lived and all of that. And that's what these queries were about. The data that the NSA had was being accessed by the Obama administration, and it was being accessed in a way that did not follow the laws and procedures that were in place to prevent Americans from being spied on without warrants. We had that in place, that they were supposed to have warrants before they could spy on Americans, but that's what they were bypassing by doing these data searches. Now, this happened actually long before Trump came in. And you can see here that they vowed to follow it in 2011, but that's not what was happening. And it wasn't just for Trump. I think they've been doing this surveillance for a very long time, several years. So they've been looking at people, and it could very well be that they were looking at anyone who said certain words. Or, if you're like talking on your phone to a friend of yours and you mentioned Obama or you mentioned Putin or anything like that, you may have been surveilled. I used to go into Pal Talk political chat rooms, and it was almost a joke in there that the NSA was listening to us. I mean, really, people used to joke about it all the time because that's what we believed was true. And it does seem to be that was really true. And maybe not just the NSA, but more than that. Well, anyway, as it went on, Mike Rogers was the person who was the head of the NSA. Now, according to the law, when they did these queries, there were only two people who could sign off on them. And one of them was the Attorney General, who at the time, remember in Obama's administration, at the end was Loretta Lynch, or it could be the director of the NSA, and it had to be one of the two of them. Well, guess who was in charge of the NSA? Admiral Mike Rogers. And he knew he wasn't signing off on these things, that they weren't doing it because of him. And he was looking into it and started figuring out, you know what? This is not being done right. And as he went through, there were some things that he pointed out, and he started raising a stink about it. Yep, he did. And he was basically saying, you're violating people's Fourth Amendment rights. You are spying on Americans, and you're doing it for political reasons. And this is just not right. So, this is what happened to Flynn, like it says here. All of this raises serious constitutional questions of how FISA has been applied on U.S. soil. Americans for Limited Government President Rick Manning urged Congress to slow down reauthorization of Section 702 of FISA in a statement saying, the implications of the Obama administration unmasking hundreds of targeted people unconstitutionally leads any reasonable person to wonder how precisely this illegally gained information was used. In light of the obvious abuse of power in the Mike Flynn case of leaking Flynn's name to the press after being unmasked for political reasons, it becomes reasonable to assume that was the intent of these unmaskings all along, and calls into question the continuance of the entire program. So that was somebody who was raising the question on that. And, if they had no reason to be getting these searches and, warrantless searches where no criminality is implicated, this is a constitutional issue because we do have a right, our Fourth Amendment right, that requires the government to have a warrant to surveil us. So that's something very important that needs to be addressed. And when it's talking about all of this, it also harkens back, this one, to the Church Committee in 1975. By the way, this link will not take you there. This takes you to an article that's about the FBI Director Comey And he says that he did request access to the DNC servers. So I don't know why that link takes you there. It was an interesting article, but it has nothing to do with this. But anyway, the Church Committee was a hearing that went on, and Church was like one of the guys that was running it. So they found out that, yeah, the CIA had been engaged in a mass domestic surveillance program against anti-war protesters, members of Congress, and other political figures. So you've got to start thinking, when we're talking about this type of surveillance, we're not talking about Trump. We're not talking about a handful of people around Trump. We're talking hundreds of people. It's not just politicians. It was regular Americans being surveilled too, purely because of what they were saying and being caught on, saying something online or saying something, on the phone or whatever the case is. They were being picked out too. And so I tend to think there probably is some kind of file for me. And all of those jokes we made in the Pal Talk chat room, see how they probably were true. Little did I know they were that true. Yeah, Senator Frank Church was one of them that was talking about that. And he was a Democrat. But yeah, it was very serious hearing there. And at the time, the CIA was called out. They were caught in a lot of the things they were doing. And, they did one of those cross your fingers behind your back and say, oh, no, we won't do it again. Yeah, right. I don't believe them. I know that. In fact, I know that's what they've been up to anyway. It's very important that this be addressed. And you can't just say, no, it's never going to happen again. We're not going to do anything about it. No, it has to be addressed. So a few other things that it brought up. It brought up this particular article. Why did Obama dawdle on Russia's hacking? This is a very interesting point here. And this is by that David Ignatius, who is no fan of Trump's. But he actually was reporting a few things and talking about, what? We need to address the situation. First of all, did Trump's campaign encourage Russia's alleged hacking and all of that? So he does, take the definite Democrat stance there. But then he goes on, the country needs to know what's true and what's false. And I agree with him on that. And, they were talking about these different meetings, pretty much the things that were in the Mueller report. But why did the Obama administration wait so long to deal with Russia's apparent hacking? This is the Hamlet puzzle in our drama. Like the Prince of Denmark, President Obama delayed taking action, even as evidence mounted of dastardly deeds. And he talks about, when did the Gang of Eight know about it? And so this is kind of an interesting article here. And what discussions has the Trump team had with Russian officials about future relations? And that goes back to the Flynn thing. But we all know what was really happening and that was set up. He points out here, the traditional Democrat reasoning for Flynn talking to Sergei Kislyak. But down here at the bottom, I thought this was very interesting. He has an update here. And it says the Trump transition team did not respond Thursday night to a request for comment, but two team members called with information Friday morning. A first Trump official confirmed that Flynn had spoken with Kislyak by phone, but said the calls were before sanctions were announced and didn't cover that topic. This official later added that Flynn's initial call was to express condolences to Kislyak after the terrorist killing of the Russian ambassador to Ankara December 19th, and that Flynn made a second call December 28th to express condolences for the shootdown of a Russian plane carrying a choir to Syria. In that second call, Flynn also discussed plans for a Trump-Putin conversation sometime after the inauguration. In addition, a second Trump official said the December 28th call included an invitation from Kislyak for a Trump administration official to visit Kazakhstan for a conference in late January. So, see, this is something that, I'm kind of surprised that he included, but did we ever hear any of this? No. Not very much. I mean, that was definitely something that was kind of shoved under the rug so people wouldn't talk about it. So anyway, that I wanted to point that out to you. It was one of the articles that was linked to in there. And I thought it was kind of interesting that, yeah, this all started playing out and we knew about it, but Obama knew about it. And you got to think about the timing on this, because this happened under Obama's watch. This was before the election that a lot of this went on. And so why did Obama allow it to happen? Well, I think most of us know why he did, because he was for that. Now, this is the report that was put out. It's now, declassified. And this is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court information. And there's a memorandum, opinion, and order. And really, you start reading this and you find out, wow, they did stuff they weren't supposed to do. And right here, this is where it says, in this September 26, 2016 submission included certifications that were executed by the Attorney General and the Director of National Intelligence. Yeah, guess who they were? Remember, this is all under Obama's watch. Yep, that was happening. And so all of these are his people that he had in there. So why do you think these people are so scared? Well, they know their names are on this. They were the ones doing it. So they were doing this to like hundreds and thousands of Americans. They were not supposed to be doing it, but they were, and they were using it for basically their own private opposition research. I mean, that's what they were using it for, so they could target their political enemies. And this is really what was going on. Now, again, the person who really got this all kicked off was Mike Rogers. Now, I'm going to play a clip for you from Dan Bongino, and I want you to hear what he had to say about the situation.
So the first plan they do to hit the Trump team, folks, is they learn to manipulate these about queries in the NSA database. The NSA is a database of a whole boatload of information, metadata, texts, that kind of stuff. How it works is too complicated in the time I have. But what you can do is you can query that NSA system and you can get a whole lot of information. But what happens? This is plan A. This is how they're going to get the information. I hope, if I'm not following, please stop me, because this is important. The Obama administration figures out that through unmasking, in other words, wiretapping people, pretending they're targeting foreigners, and then querying information in this database, that they can get all the political opposition research in the world that they need against the Trump team. It's beautiful. No one's going to call them out. The media's on their side, right? But there's a good guy in this. There's a white hat. Somebody in the government sniffs this thing out. That's why I tell you, this wasn't plan A. This was the plan. They were going to unmask people, wiretap people, and they were going to query this NSA database and get all the information they needed about the Trump team. But somebody smells a problem, and he's not having it. And he's the white hat. He's the good guy in this story. And it's Mike Rogers of the NSA. Mike Rogers of the NSA senses that there's something wrong about these about queries. In other words, who's tapping into the database here and making political queries? Now, folks, some of you, I don't know your politics. I assume most of you are conservative, libertarian, or Republican, but that's fine either way. If you doubt any of what I'm telling you, just Google the FISA Intelligence Surveillance Court, their report on about queries. Because Mike Rogers goes to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court and says, Houston, we got a problem. These queries are supposed to follow very specific guidelines about terrorism, and all these metrics have to be, you can't just spy on Americans in the database. The FISA court looks into it, comes back with a report that was released in March of 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, that is devastating. If you haven't read it, you were doing yourself a great disservice. Page 80 specifically is horrifying. Apparently, the NSA database was being queried by private contractors working with the FBI. These were not even government officials. People within the government were using private contractors to query information they had no judicial or legal authority whatsoever to look at. Rogers smells a rat. People panic in the government. Now, conveniently, what happens right after the election? I'm going to put these pieces together and things will start to make sense. Donald Trump's elected. He's the president-elect, right? 10 days after the election, Rogers, who knows this has been going on the whole time, these unmaskings, the tapping of the... Now does the Donald Trump tweet, they tap Trump Tower? Then how does it make sense? He got the wording wrong. He didn't understand exactly how it worked, but the idea was not wrong. Donald Trump's not stupid, trust me. Guy got elected president, earned $1 billion. I love, by the way, I love how these journalists criticize him. The guy's making $25,000 a year writing clickbait pieces for BuzzFeed. Like, Donald Trump's an idiot. Hard pass, brother. Like, well, the guy just won he runs for office the first time and he becomes the president. But let me listen to Joey Bag of Donuts at BuzzFeed. You're right, you've got this. It's like, so about 10 days after the election, Donald Trump, someone goes up to visit Donald Trump in Trump Tower. Who visits him? Mike Rogers. But Rogers doesn't tell anyone. This is going to trip you out totally. He doesn't tell anybody in the White House he's going up there. He visits Trump in Trump Tower, conveniently 10 days after the election, which from my experience in the Secret Service is just enough time for them to go up to Trump Tower, WACA, the White House Communications Agency, for the president-elect, and set up a SCIF where they can talk privately, a sensitive, compartmentalized information facility. In other words, a place where no one can listen in. Rogers gives it about 10 days, goes up there, has this big meeting with Donald Trump, and what happens the very next day? Donald Trump evacuates Trump Tower and goes to Bedminster, New Jersey to never return for another meeting. You think that was a coinky-dink? Like he did that by accident? Oh, let's just go up to Bedminster. I got nothing else to do.
It was a really good speech that he made, and it lasts about 36 minutes long. I will put the link to the whole thing down below. You know me and links. I always put them down there for you. So you can watch the whole thing. I think he did an excellent job of laying it all out. So if you have people who are still not sure whether Trump was spied on, this would be a very good thing for them to listen to because he lays it all out there. And, you know, he was a Secret Service and in law enforcement. So he does have a unique perspective that I think is very valid and can help people understand what was going on from his point of view. So I really love this speech that he did, and I think it's well worth listening to the whole thing. But like I said, I only wanted to play a little bit for you so that you got an idea of what he was saying there. And so things are starting to come out now. Now, of course, this stuff, like I said, is a blast from the past because all of this material I've been showing you here is from like 2017. Well, this one was a speech that Dan did, I believe, in 2018, November 2018. Yeah, November 22nd, 2018. So this stuff has been out there, but we're just not aware of it. We haven't been putting the pieces together. And many of you have heard me say this before, but it's like having a big puzzle spread out in front of you. And you have all these little pieces. At first, you don't see how they fit together. But then you start putting little sections together, little bits and pieces. Sometimes they start with the border. And, you know, you can put those together. And then you can work on little parts of the puzzle. And as the puzzle starts coming together, you really start getting a feel for what the picture is. And this is where we are right now in this whole situation. That we're starting to see how the pieces fit together. And we're seeing bigger parts of it so we can see more of what the picture is going to be. And this about Mike Rogers is very huge. And why is it really huge? So on the Ingram angle tonight, Huckabee was the host for tonight. And they were talking about this kind of thing and what was going on. And I want to play a little clip for you about what Digenova says here, because he was one of the original FISA court guys. So he really does know what the FISA court was supposed to be and how it's supposed to work. So he has a good opinion on what's happening. And notice what he has to say about Mike Rogers. This is huge, folks, and I'll tell you why when we come back.
Sense of justice. And there's nobody that knows much more about the FISA court than Joe Digenova, who's one of the original lawyers on the FISA court. And
so, Joe,
what they did with this court is an outrage, and it's got to be corrected because we all can be invaded like this.
And I think that's what scares us. So, Joe, Rudy just mentioned that your personal knowledge and experience with the FISA court is legendary. We know that. Why does this matter to the average American sitting at home with a bowl of popcorn and a soft drink? Why does it matter to them what happens in this entire investigation?
Because it's about the rule of law and privacy. The Obama administration, for more than 4 years before the 2016 election, allowed 4 contractors working for the FBI to illegally surveil American citizens illegally. The FISA court has already found that. By the way, Robert Ray mentioned that there is the Horowitz report coming out in May or possibly early June. There's another report that everybody has forgotten about involving James Comey alone. That will be out in 2 weeks. That report is going to be a bombshell. It's going to open up the investigation on a very high note, and there will be criminal referrals in it. The FISA court abuse is the center of this entire abuse of governmental power. And the chief judge of that court has already ruled that the FBI broke the law and that the people at the head of the Justice Department, Sally Yates, John Carlin, the Assistant Attorney General for the National Security, all knew about it and lied to the court, the FISA court, about it.
Robert,
it's been given to Bill Barr already, and it is going to happen. So things are coming out into the forefront. And when I heard him say Mike Rogers, I was like, yay! Literally, I was doing that because that's the key. Now that Mike Rogers is out there, his name is out there, we're going to start seeing some amazing stuff come out because Mike Rogers knows what was going on. He's the guy that witnessed it. And he's been doing a lot of things behind the scenes, too. I think he's been testifying. I would not be surprised if he spent a lot of time in front of a lot of grand juries because he knows what was going on. And like Dan Bongino said, when Obama found out that Rogers had gone to tip off Trump, he wanted to get him fired. And they tried, but they just didn't have enough time. And that's very fortunate for us as a country because, wow, that guy has been such a huge hero in our country. And one of these days, everybody's going to know it because his integrity and his patriotism has saved our country, essentially. And so he's going to be honored very highly in the future. I can see it now. So, yeah, Mike Rogers, as soon as I heard his name, I was so happy. It's just, this is one of the biggest things. It's like bringing out a star witness. And as soon as the star witness comes out and has been named, all of a sudden the tables are so turned and it's going to be epic. It's just going to be wow. Because he does know so much. And you see, you got to remember that he's the person who hid the tarmac recording. Yeah, there's a recording of Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton making their lovely little deal. And, Mike Rogers is the one that miscatalogued it. Oh, what a patriot. This guy has just been so great. God put that man in that position for that time, and he has not disappointed us. So, yeah, that's him. And that's what we have to look forward to because in a couple weeks, we're going to see another report. And I didn't really know that one about Comey. I must have missed that along the way. I didn't know they were doing a separate one for him, but yay, go for it. So a couple weeks, we're going to see the one on Comey. We've got the one on the FISA. There is another one that's going to come out on the Clinton investigation, as I understand it. And so there should be several of them coming up real fast. And it's going to be one thing after another once this starts going. It's like dominoes. They're going to start falling and they're going to fall fast. So I'm hoping that we're going to see some arrests pretty soon. A couple of months. Man, we should start seeing several. And the only question now is, who's going to be the first one? My bet right now is on McCabe, but maybe Comey, he would be a good one too. But there's so many to choose from. Brennan and Clapper and Obama himself, Sally Yates, Loretta Lynch. There's just so many. who to choose from? That's a good question for you to discuss down in the comments. So tell me who you think the first one is going to be. Anyway, that's what I've got for you on this one. I want to thank you for stopping by, and I'll see y'all later.